Welcome, thrill seekers. Prepare to be chilled by these tales, each with a hook designed to grab your darkest curiosities. The Dancing Skeleton. What happens when a man deemed so unpleasant in life refuses to stay dead, returning home as a dusty corpse to ask his terrified widow, "Who's dead?"
Aaron Kelly was dead. There wasn't anything anybody could do about it, and, to tell the truth, nobody much cared. Aaron had been so mean and unpleasant in his life that folks were glad to see him go. Even his widow never shed a tear. She just bought a coffin, put Aaron in it, and buried him. But that very night, Aaron got up out of his grave and came home. His family was sitting around the fire when he walked in, looking dusty, dirty, and disheveled. He took a seat next to his widow and said,
"What's all this about? You're all acting like somebody's dead. Who's dead?"
His widow looked at him and said,
"Oh my God.
"Damn it, woman,"
said Aaron.
"I asked you who's dead."
You are."
said his widow, shaking like a cold dog in a wet sack.
"Me dead?"
said Aaron.
I don't feel dead. I feel fine. I don't care how you feel," his widow said.
You look dead. You better get yourself back to the grave where you belong,
"No."
said Aaron.
I ain't going back to no grave until I feel dead,
Oh my God!
said the widow.
How long can this corpse last?
Not long, said her brother.
Not in this hot weather. He can't last long.
Yet, despite the widow and the weather and the heat and the rain and all, Aaron just kept lasting and lasting. All he did from sunup to sundown was sit by the fire, rocking in his chair and warming his hands and feet. But his joints were dry and his back was stiff, and every time he moved, he creaked and cracked like a dead tree in the wind. His widow couldn't collect his life insurance because Aaron swore to God he wasn't dead, and she couldn't pay for the coffin because she didn't get the insurance. And the undertaker said he was going to take back the coffin because it wasn't paid for. The widow told all this to Aaron, but Aaron didn't care.
Open quotation mark.
"Don't you miss me?"
The asked.
Open quotation mark.
"Miss you?"
Said his wife.
"How am I going to miss you? I ain't had no chance to miss you yet. You ain't gone."
One night, the best fiddler in town came to court the widow. He had heard that Aaron was dead, and he wanted to marry her. He sat on one side of the fire, and Aaron sat on the other, stretching his arms and legs, and all the time, creaking and cracking. By this time, he was so dried out that he was little more than a skeleton. Open quotation mark. I'm wore out listening to him creak and crack, the fiddler said.
Something ought to be done.
How long do we gotta put up with this dead corpse? The widow asked. How long do we got to wait until he molders? How long do we got to sit in front of this fire? You and me and him. Aaron stretched himself and said, This isn't very jolly. Let's be jolly. Let's dance! The fiddler got out his fiddle and began to play. Aaron stretched himself, shook himself, got up, took a step or two, and began to dance a jig. With his old bones rattling, and his yellow teeth snapping, and his bald head waggling, and his arms flip-flopping, around and around the room he went. The fiddler played and Aaron danced. Up and down the floor he danced. With his long legs clocking and his knee bones knocking, he skipped and pranced around the room. How that dead man danced. But pretty soon, a bone came loose and fell to the floor.
My golly, look at that,
Said the fiddler.
Play more, faster, exclamation mark,
Said the widow. The fiddler played faster. Crickety-crack, down and back, the dead man went hopping. Every time he jumped, he cracked, and every time he cracked, another dry bone dropped on the floor. This way, that way, the pieces just kept dropping.
Play, man!
Cried the widow. The fiddler fiddled faster. Dead Aaron danced, and all the time he danced, the bones kept dropping, until all at once, Aaron crumbled and fell apart. His rib bones rolled around on the floor, and there, dead Aaron lay, just a heap of bones on the floor. All that was left was his bald head bone, and it danced by itself in the middle of the floor, grinning at the fiddler and cracking its teeth. That head kept dancing, up, up, up.
Oh my sweet Lord! Look at that!
said the fiddler.
Bring my ladder!
cried the widow.
Oh!
said the head bun.
Ain't we having fun?
The fiddler couldn't stand it anymore.
Widow?
You said. I got to go, and he left the house and never came back. The family gathered the bones together and put them back in the grave. They were careful to mix them up and lay them all crissity-crossity and unjoined so Aaron couldn't fit them back together again. After that, dead Aaron didn't get up anymore and stayed in his grave. But his widow stayed a widow from that day to this and never got married again. That dancing skeleton and his dead head spoiled the romance. Second story, the basket.
A seemingly innocent offer to carry a woman's basket on a frosty night takes a horrifying turn when a small voice speaks from within, followed by the reveal of its gruesome contents. Gabriel Fisher spent the evening in the pub with his dog Trotty by his side.
It was just before midnight when he finished his last drink and started for home. Outside, it was cold and frostly and as silent as the grave. He thought he saw a figure moving in the distance up ahead.
As the man walked on down the road with his dog, he saw that it was a woman walking ahead of him. She was carrying a basket on her shoulder, and it was covered with a white cloth. When he caught up to her, he looked to see who it was, but it was dark, and she was so bundled up against the cold that it was hard to see her face. Trotty started to growl at her.
"Good evening," Gabriel said.
"What brings you out so late?" The woman didn't answer. They walked on in silence for a while. Then Gabriel said,
"May I carry your basket?"
Without a word, the woman took it off her shoulder and handed it to him. From inside the basket, he heard a small voice say, "That's very nice of you," and that was followed by wild laughter. Gabriel was so startled that he dropped the basket on the ground.
The white cloth slipped off and out rolled a woman's severed head. He looked down at the head and he stared at the woman. It's your head," he cried in horror. His dog Trotty gave a howl and fled in terror. As the woman stooped down to pick up her head, Gabriel took off running too. The woman chased after him, holding her head in her hands. He could hear her footsteps behind him. She was gaining on him. Then he looked down and noticed something rolling along the ground beside him. It was the severed head. With a ghastly laugh, the head rolled in front of him, trying to trip him up. Gabriel managed to jump over it. He could hear the slap, slap, slap of running footsteps behind him. Then, the head sprang into the air and sank its teeth into his ankle. Gabriel screamed with pain and shook the head off. He tried to run faster, but the woman's body and her head stayed right on his tail. The head sprang into the air again and bit into his other leg. He let out another scream and kicked the head away. Just then, Gabriel came to a small stream. With a mighty effort, he leaped across it and kept running, not daring to look back until he got home. His dog Trotty was waiting at the house when he returned. Gabriel looked back into the darkness, but the headless woman and her severed head were gone. Third story, the little black dog. A man haunted by a silent, unseen black dog insists it's the ghost of a man he murdered. But what happens when the phantom hound's presence becomes undeniable, even in death? There was an old man named Billy who claimed that he was being followed around by a little black dog. He said it followed him wherever he went and wouldn't leave him alone. Billy could often be seen hollering and cursing and throwing rocks, trying to drive the dog away. All of the people in town thought he was crazy because there was no dog there. Whenever somebody tried to tell Billy there wasn't any dog to see, he'd reply, "Maybe you don't see it, but I do, and I'm not any crazier than you are."
As the story goes, the first time Billy saw the little black dog was on the day he killed Silas Burton. Back in those days, the town was full of robbers and bandits. Everyone carried a gun and people were always going around fighting each other or killing each other. Billy was a young man back then, and he hated Silas Burton. They had been feuding for years. One day, Billy saw Silas come riding toward him. As soon as their eyes met, both men went for their guns. Billy managed to get to his first and fired off the first shot. He hit Silas Burton square in the shoulder, knocking him off his horse. The horse got a fright and ran off.
leaving Silas Burton lying there in the dirt with a bloody arm and a broken back. His gun had fallen where he couldn't reach it, and he was just a sitting duck. He lay there on the ground, writhing in pain and begging Billy not to kill him.
Billy just looked down at him and spit in his face. Then he leveled his gun and killed him in cold blood. Silas Burton's little black dog came running over and started licking the dead man's face. Then it let out a pitiful whine and started barking and snarling at Billy. Still in a murderous rage, Billy killed the dog too and left both of the corpses lying there in the road. Back then, there was no law in the town, so there was no sheriff and no deputies to arrest Billy. After the murder, he just walked home, drank a few beers, and went to bed. But all night long, he heard the little black dog whining outside his cabin. I must be imagining things, Billy said to himself as he tossed and turned in bed. That dog is dead. I know because I shot it myself. The next morning, when Billy woke up, he looked out the window and saw the dog staring back at him. It was waiting for him outside. From that moment on, not a day went by when he didn't see it. At night, the dog would be scratching on his door and barking to be let in. During the day, it would follow him around town. Billy kept finding black dog hairs everywhere. They were on his sofa, on the floor, in his bed, and sometimes he even found them in his food. The whole house stank of dog. It ain't my imagination, Billy said. That's Cy Burton's little black dog. Things went on like that for many years. Then one morning, in the middle of winter, the neighbors didn't see any smoke coming out of Billy's chimney. When they went to his house to check up on him, Billy wasn't there. A few days later, they found his body lying in a field behind his cabin. Billy had plenty of enemies, and at first it seemed like somebody might have killed him, but there wasn't a mark on him. He was lying in the snow and there weren't any footprints out there, except for Billy's. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong with the body, and he couldn't figure out the cause of death. He said that Billy might have died of old age, or a heart attack, or the cold, but nobody believed that. There was something odd about his death. When the neighbors found Billy, there were black dog hairs on his clothes. There were even a few on his face. It smelled like a dog had been out there, yet no one had seen a dog anywhere. Fourth story. Such things happen. Superstition meets a string of unfortunate events, leading a farmer to take drastic measures against the town witch. The chicken well, with a shocking and deadly outcome. When a farmer's cow stopped giving milk, he called the local vet. Open quotation mark.
I can't find a thing wrong with that cow, the vet said, puzzled. If I didn't know better, I'd say some witch has cast a spell on her. The farmer and the vet both laughed. That old hag, Addie Fitch, replied the farmer. I guess she's the closest thing to a witch we've got to a witch around these parts. When a few weeks previously, the farmer had an argument with Addie Fitch when he accidentally ran over her pet cat with his tractor.
Open quotation mark.
I'm really sorry, Addie, he said. I'll get you a new cat. Her eyes were filled with rage and hatred. Open quotation mark. I raised that cat from a kitten, she hissed.
I loved her! You'll be sorry for this!
A few days later, the farmer's cow had suddenly stopped giving milk. Then his truck broke down. After that, his wife slipped and fell, breaking her arm.
Open quotation mark.
We're having a lot of bad luck recently, Owe thought. Maybe it's that old witch, Addie Fitch, getting even with me. According to legend, if you were cursed by a witch, there is only one way to stop her. You should carve a picture of the witch into a tree, then drive a nail into the picture where the heart should be. Every day you drive it in a little deeper, and every day, the witch will feel more pain. On the 9th day, the witch will die. The farmer decided to test out the old legend. He took out a pocket knife and drew a picture of Addie Fitch on a black walnut tree. Then he fetched a hammer and a nail and drove the nail into Addie's heart. Every day he came out to the old tree and drove the nail in deeper. On the evening of the 9th day, he was out working in his field, near where the old lady lived. Looking up at her house, the farmer started wondering what was going on up there. Then, in the dim light, he saw Addie Fitch coming slowly down the hill toward him. With her thin, bony face and her old black coat wrapped tightly around her, she really did look like a witch.
As she got closer, Bill saw that she could barely walk.
Maybe I'm really hurting her.
You thought. Perhaps I should stop all this and pull the nail out.
Before he knew it, Addie Fitch was in the field, coming towards him, her face twisted with rage.
Open quotation mark.
You killed my cat, she shrieked.
And now you're killing me!
Then she fell dead at his feet. I'm not surprised that she dropped dead that way, the doctor said later. She was very old, maybe 90 years of age. Her heart just stopped. Some people thought she was a witch, said the farmer.
Open quotation mark. I've heard the rumors.
The doctor said.
Open quotation mark. Somebody I know thought that Addie Fitch had put a curse on him.
The farmer continued. He drew a picture of her on a tree, then drove a nail into it to make her stop. That's an old superstition, the doctor said. But people like us don't believe in that sort of thing, do we?
Fifth story, rings on her fingers. A grave robber's greed for gold rings on a corpse's fingers awakens more than just the dead, leading to a terrifying and ironic end. One day, Florence Wyndham suddenly took ill and slipped into a coma. Despite all that the doctors tried to do for her, she eventually died. Her husband was heartbroken. She was buried in a small cemetery about a mile from her home. In the middle of the night, a grave robber broke into the cemetery. He was carrying a lantern and a shovel. He began to dig her up. When his shovel eventually hit wood, he scrambled down into the grave and prized the coffin open. Holding up the lantern, he looked at the corpse inside and saw 2 gold rings on the dead woman's fingers. Taking hold of her cold, dead hand, he began trying to pull off the rings, but they were stuck fast. He decided that the only way to get the gold rings was to cut off her fingers. Taking a knife out of his pocket, he sliced into the finger with the first gold ring, and, to his horror, it began to bleed. He heard a rustling sound, and the woman's corpse began to stir. Suddenly, it sat up straight in the coffin. The terrified man jerked backwards and accidentally dropped the lantern. He was left in complete darkness, crouched down in the grave, frozen in fear. Just then, he felt 10 cold fingers around his neck. The man let out a horrible scream and scrambled out of the grave as fast as he could. In a panic, he began running, not daring to look back. Blinded by fear and confusion, he had no idea where he was going. He just kept running through the pitch darkness. In his terror, the man didn't realize that he was fleeing in the wrong direction. He ran headlong over the edge of a cliff and fell down onto the rocks below. He fell on his own knife, and it stabbed him straight through the heart. The thief bled to death at the bottom of the cliff.